Hello! Today we invite you on one of humanity's most ancient and universal journeys, the story of music and musical instruments. It began with the simple striking of stones, continued with the first melodies blown through hollow bones, and evolved through the lyres and ouds, the flutes and organs, the grandeur of orchestras, and finally, the electronic tones of the digital age. Every instrument is more than a tool for sound. It is a vessel of memory, carrying the spirit, the culture, and the aesthetic essence of the society that created it. Now, let us trace the footsteps of music as it grew alongside humankind, following the ever-changing echoes of sound through the ages. Primitive rhythms, stones, bones, and the sounds of nature. The history of music may be even older than humanity itself, for music relies not only on notes or instruments, but on rhythm and sound. For early humans, nature was a symphony orchestra. The rustling of leaves in the wind, the splash of water against stones, thunder, or the songs of birds. Each was an inspiring source of sound. Humans first began producing rhythm with their own bodies. In hunter-gatherer communities, clapping hands and stomping feet served not only for entertainment, but also for communication and reinforcing social bonds. Over time, people discovered ways to create sound from surrounding materials. Striking stones together, hitting hollow logs with mallets, or blowing through animal bones. These techniques gradually developed. Archaeological findings show that humanity used its first musical instruments around 40,000 years ago. In a cave in Germany, a flute made from a bird bone stands as one of the oldest known instruments. This flute represents not only a technical achievement, but also evidence of aesthetic sense and ritual needs. Primitive music was often used in religious ceremonies, natural events, or life cycle rituals. Drums for rain dances, instruments for birth and funeral rites. Music deepened humanity's connection with nature. Rhythm did more than please the ear. It aligned the body, mind, and spirit. During this period, music was not only an art, but also a tool for survival. Tribe members used sound to move together, synchronize, and cultivate shared emotions. Where language did not exist, music offered a form of common understanding, giving life to strings, from lyre to oud, the first string instruments. One of the first melodic steps in music history occurred when sound broke away from rhythm and became notes. The emergence of stringed instruments. Humans began stretching strings made from animal intestines or plant fibers over wooden frames, creating primitive instruments. These instruments carried not only music, but also emotions, prayers, and stories. In Mesopotamia, the Ur Lyre, dating back to around 2500 BCE, is one of the oldest known stringed instruments. Adorned with precious stones and featuring a wooden body, it was used in both religious ceremonies and royal courts. At the same time, in ancient Egypt, harp-like instruments accompanied temple rituals and official events. For societies that believed music was a way to communicate with the gods, these instruments were considered sacred. In Greek civilization, the lyre and kithara became essential in musical education. Mentioned in Homer's epics, these instruments were not only musical tools, but also integral to philosophy, poetry, and social order. They symbolized not just sound, but a person's education and cultural identity. In the East, the oud evolved in Arab and Persian civilizations into more than just an instrument. It became the pinnacle of melodic expression. Considered the ancestor of the modern guitar, the oud played a key role in shaping musical theory in the Islamic world. Scholars studying the scientific aspects of music examined the oudi's range to develop early notation systems. The history of stringed instruments reflects both technical evolution and the place of music in human life. Each vibrating string conveys a culture's emotions, beliefs, and artistic vision. As civilizations advanced, stringed instruments underwent both cultural and technological transformations. Traditional lyres and ouds were complemented by new instruments like the balama, lavta, saz, and mandolin in different regions. In Europe, from the 15th century onward, guitar-like instruments began to take shape. First came the classical guitar, followed by the emergence of the violin family, which became indispensable in orchestras. With the Industrial Revolution, string technology changed. Gut strings were replaced with metal and nylon, enhancing sound power and expanding performance possibilities. The last major leap occurred in the 20th century, the invention of electric guitars. By the 1930s, the electric guitar took the stage, quickly becoming central to jazz, blues, and rock music. Today, the guitar is one of the most widely used stringed instruments worldwide, in both classical and popular music. What began with the lyre now resonates in the digital realm, enriched with electronic effects and modern soundscapes. Melody. Through breath, the origins of flutes and wind instruments. Music has breath at its core. What began with the human voice took on a new dimension with the invention of wind instruments. Reeds, bones, and pieces of wood harvested from nature became the first musical tools. These simple creations gradually became essential for spiritual rituals, social ceremonies, and personal expression. One of the oldest examples is a Neanderthal bone flute found in Slovenia, dating back approximately 60,000 years. This flute, made from an animal bone, shows that music was not exclusive to Homo sapiens. Our human ancestors also developed forms of sonic expression. In ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt, wind instruments were primarily used in religious ceremonies. Reed instruments, similar to the ney, produced sounds believed to purify the soul and facilitate communication with the gods. Here, breath was understood not just as a physical act, but as the voice of the spirit. In the Greek world, the aulos, with its double reed, motivated soldiers on the battlefield and accompanied dramatic scenes in theaters. In Rome, the same instrument became an indispensable part of entertainment and celebrations. In the Far East, bamboo flutes were integral to Chinese and Japanese culture, used for meditative and poetic expression. Instruments such as the shakuhachi and dizi were not only musical tools, but also means of personal discipline, harmony with nature, and spiritual purification. Flutes and other wind instruments developed unique forms in every culture. Yet, they shared one common purpose: to transform human breath into a medium of expression. Every note carried by breath represents both an individual inner journey and a collective cultural expression. Hit, strike, listen. The evolution of percussion instruments. Rhythm is the most primitive and universal language of music. Percussion instruments were among the earliest forms of audible communication, connecting humans to nature and to their own bodies. From clapping hands to striking stones, from simple drums to the invention of cymbals, this journey reflects humanity's desire both to express emotions and to organize time. The first percussion instruments emerged from natural objects: stones, wood, bones. The sounds produced with these materials served practical purposes, coordinating hunts, signaling danger, or gathering the community. Rhythmic sounds functioned almost like a language. In ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia, drum-like instruments were used in ceremonies as well as in warfare. The power of rhythm had a direct psychological impact. It fostered unity, inspired courage, and created mystical atmospheres. Cuneiform tablets from Mesopotamia contain the earliest documented rhythmic instructions, showing the systematic use of these instruments. In African cultures, rhythm was not just music, it was identity. Each tribe was recognized by its unique drum patterns, which narrated social events, initiation rituals, births, and deaths. Traditional percussion instruments like the djembe still carry this legacy today. In medieval Europe, drums were part of military formations and religious ceremonies. Over time, smaller portable instruments such as tambourines, cymbals, and maracas became part of everyday life. Rhythm evolved from ceremonial necessity to a form of joyful expression. Today, modern drum kits, electronic drums, and countless percussion instruments from world music continue to play a central role in music production. Rhythm is as fundamental as the human heartbeat. Perhaps that is why it is truly universal. Music and civilization, the journey of sound from temples to palaces. Throughout history, music has been more than entertainment. It has served as worship, ritual, and a tool of authority. In ancient times, musical instruments were first a means of communicating with the gods. In Mesopotamia, priests sang hymns accompanied by instruments. In ancient Egypt, instruments like the lyre and harp accompanied prayers offered to deities during sacred ceremonies. These instruments were not only for producing sound, but also seen as tangible extensions of the sacred. In Greek civilization, music held both philosophical and societal significance. According to Plato, music was a fundamental tool for the education of the soul. Instruments of this era were not merely for individual performance. They also symbolized social class and cultural education. Wind instruments, such as the aulos, were more common in theaters and among the populace, while the lyre was preferred by aristocratic circles and educated youth. In the Middle East, instruments like the ney and rebab intertwined with mystical traditions, forming the foundation of Sufi music. These instruments expressed not just sound, but a spiritual state. The same melodies resonated in dervish rituals, royal feasts, and public celebrations, carrying different meanings depending on context. As the Middle Ages progressed, music became an integral part of royal courts, not only temples or town squares. Kings patronized musicians to display power and sophistication. Musical instruments evolved from simple wooden objects into richly decorated works of art, sometimes adorned with gold and intricate inlays. This chapter traces the transformation of musical instruments from ordinary objects to sacred and political symbols. For once, the sound of a single instrument could suffice to speak to the gods or proclaim the power of a kingdom. Melodies of the Middle Ages, the rise of polyphony in Europe. Medieval Europe represents a crucial period in which music was not only part of religious ceremonies, but also began to be recorded in written form. During this era, churches became the central hubs of music. Music was regarded as a pathway to God, making church choirs and Gregorian chants fundamental elements. These chants were initially monophonic, consisting of a single melodic line, but over time, polyphony, the simultaneous sounding of multiple melodies, emerged. This transition marked a significant evolution in the history of music. Hearing different melodies at the same time introduced both technical and aesthetic innovations. Centers like the Notre Dame School became the birthplace of polyphonic compositions, transforming music from purely worship into an intellectual pursuit as well. One of the most prominent instruments of this period was the organ. With its massive structure and resonant sound, it became indispensable in cathedrals. The organ affected listeners both spiritually and physically, elevating sacred music to an entirely new dimension. Stringed instruments, such as the viol family, also emerged during this era. The viol, considered a predecessor of the modern violin, was used both in church ceremonies and in courtly music. In the Middle Ages, music was not only an offering to God, but also a reflection of noble power, artistic engagement, and the cultural fabric of society. The notation of music ensured its transmission across generations, laying the foundation for Europe's subsequent musical revolutions. The Golden Age of Music. Instruments in the Baroque, Classical, and Romantic eras. The periods of Baroque, Classical, and Romantic music mark the pinnacle of aesthetic expression. Each era brought a distinct emotional intensity, technical innovation, and expressive power to music. During these times, musical instruments were not merely tools for producing sound, they became vessels through which composers transformed imagination into reality. The Baroque era, 1600 to 1750, was characterized by grandeur, ornamentation, and drama. The organ and harpsichord dominated this period. The harpsichord's metal strings gave it a distinctive timbre, while string instruments became increasingly prominent in orchestras. The violin family developed technically during this time, becoming a cornerstone of orchestral sound. With the classical era, 1750 to 1820, simplicity, symmetry, and clarity came to the forefront. The piano rose to prominence, surpassing the harpsichord with its sensitive keys, allowing for dynamic and expressive nuance. Composers such as Haydn, Mozart, and Beethoven shaped the music of this era. Their works made music accessible not only to the aristocracy, but also to the general public. The Romantic era, 1820 to 1900, emphasized emotional expression and individualism. Composers used instruments like the violin, piano, and cello to convey longing, passion, and melancholy more directly. Orchestral structures expanded, tonal palettes broadened, and timbres diversified. During this period, both materials and production techniques of instruments improved, allowing for stronger, more resilient sounds. Together, these three eras represent a transformative journey for musical instruments, not only in technical capabilities but also in expressive and functional roles. Music became an experience to be felt, shared, and communicated, and instruments were the carriers of this profound human expression. Industry and sound, the transformation of instruments in a modernizing world. The Industrial Revolution transformed not only factories and transportation, but also the world of music. During this period, musical instruments entered a new era in terms of both production and distribution. Instruments that were once handcrafted by individual artisans could now reach wider audiences through mass production. The late 19th and early 20th centuries greatly increased the accessibility of musical instruments. Owning a piano at home became a cultural marker for the middle class, particularly in Europe and America. Instruments manufactured with standardized parts could be sold at more affordable prices, spreading music education and performance to broader segments of society. Brass instruments also advanced technically. Trumpets, trombones, and tubas were redesigned to produce stronger, more balanced tones. Additionally, the saxophone, invented by Adolphe Sax in the 1840s, became indispensable in both jazz music and military bands. Stringed instruments underwent modernization as well. Metal strings replaced gut strings, producing brighter and more powerful sounds. Violins, guitars, and similar instruments became more durable and consistent in both materials and construction techniques. Moreover, the invention of the gramophone and the emergence of recorded music changed listening habits. People could access music even without owning an instrument, ushering in a new era in which instruments competed not only as playable objects, but also alongside recorded and reproducible sounds. With industrialization, music spread beyond concert halls to homes, streets, factories, and radios. In this transformation, musical instruments assumed both symbolic and technological roles, bridging tradition and modernity in sound. The sound of the digital age. From electronic instruments to artificial intelligence, from the mid-20th century onward, the process of digitization profoundly redefined what a musical instrument could be. As electronic circuits began to replace analog sounds, music transformed into a form that could be produced not only through physical vibration, but also through data. In the 1930s, the theremin and ondes martineau emerged as the first experimental instruments demonstrating that sound could be generated electronically. Yet the real revolution came with the rise of synthesizers. The Moog synthesizer in the 1960s allowed musicians to create sounds previously thought impossible, producing tones and atmospheres that did not exist in nature, all through digital signals. In the 1980s, the introduction of the MIDI, Musical Instrument Digital Interface Protocol, enabled synchronization between different electronic instruments and computers. This opened the door to digital music production, allowing a single musician to create orchestral symphonies on one computer. Today, computer-based music software makes it easy to synthesize, arrange, and perform sounds. Digital audio workstations, DAWs, handle recording, mixing, effects, and arrangement, making it possible to produce music purely from digital notes, without ever touching a piano or violin. And now, we are taking one step further: AI-assisted music production. Artificial intelligence models can compose in specific styles, generate melodies aligned with emotions, and even imitate the style of existing artists to create entirely new works. This technology accelerates creative processes and sparks debates in the music industry. Who truly creates the music? Who imbues it with emotion? The digital age has transformed musical instruments from physical objects into virtual tools. Yet behind every sound, there remains human sensitivity, aesthetic decision-making, and a desire for expression. The story of musical instruments is, in essence, the story of humanity itself. From the very first rhythms struck on stones to the electronic symphonies of the digital age, every instrument is more than just a sound. It is the echo of a culture, an era, and a community of people. Today, whether we hold a guitar, a ney, a piano, or a digital synthesizer in our hands, each carries the silent witness of thousands of years of journey. Perhaps this is why music remains one of humanity's deepest connections to both the past we inherit and the future we imagine.